Hey guys, Mr. Hamid here once again. We're just finishing up topic 4, and this is just a quick review of everything we've talked about. Topic 4 talks about how organisms interact. Remember, this is, you know what, it's interactions and ecosystems. So now we're looking at specific organisms within that. We quickly started the topic off speaking about living and non-living things, and the science terms behind them are biotic and abiotic. Everything in ecosystems have living and non-living things, or organisms, or plants, animals, or beetles. Those are all living things. They're all biotic. Things that aren't living are rocks, water, air, right? Those are non-living things. The ground, that's non-living. Now, if something was living and then died, that becomes non-living. So that also becomes abiotic, just as the water, the air, the ground. Okay, those are our two main terms, biotic and abiotic. Right? Look at this picture, like I said, it's the water. We still need it. Even though it's not living, we still need it in our ecosystems for all organisms to survive. Same thing with air, we have to breathe. Right? We start looking at roles in ecosystem, right? A niche. Each organism has several niches. It has several of roles. We have several roles in our society, right? I'm a teacher. I play sports on the weekends. You know, you guys are students. You have extracurricular activities outside of that, right? Your friends group, so on and so forth. Okay. And those niches are filled, and then those roles that we have are broken down into two broad main categories: producers and consumers. Producers are organisms that create their own energy from the sun. For example, the grass or vegetables or fruits, so on and so forth, right? They produce their own energy. Consumers is any organism that has to consume something to gain energy, right? Consume would be to eat it, right? To absorb it into its body, okay? Producers and consumers, those are our two broad categories. Consumers now can be broken up into two more things: herbivores and carnivores. Herbivores, it's exactly what the word says, right? It eats herbs, it eats plants. So that is any organism that only eats plants. Examples would be mice, rabbits, okay? Those are herbivores. Carnivores becomes an animal that eats only meat, all right? A cougar will only eat meat. A lynx will only eat meat. A hawk only eats meat, okay? Carnivores only eat meat. Herbivores eat your plants. Remember, the producers, they eat that, okay? Between herbivores and carnivores, well, now we have carnivores that eat meat. We could classify these two things into something called predator and prey. Some of you might have played that as a phys ed game before, where a predator chases around a prey, the prey tries to get away. We played a game in my class that is the food chain game, where we have producers, herbivores, carnivores, and one more thing that we'll talk about later. And the whole idea is the predators chase the prey in order to eat and gain energy. All right. Now, what about animals that eat both, such as humans? Right? We eat vegetables and fruits and our herbs, and we eat meat. At least some of us do. Well, we're called omnivores, and not just us. There's several other animals: raccoons, bears. Okay, these are organisms that eat both herbs and meat. Then we started getting into the food chain. Right? The main concept of the food chain, the main idea of a food chain, usually people talk about how one animal eats another, right? And we follow that to kind of get to the top of the food chain, which normally is humans, depending on the ecosystem we're looking at. However, food chains show how energy is transferred from one organism to another, how the stored energy in one organism transfers to another. And this picture shows that beautifully, right? The energy from the sun is stored in the grass. The energy in the grass gets consumed by the mouse, which is a herbivore. Right? Then the energy in the mouse gets consumed by the snake, which is a carnivore, and now a predator. And now even that predator turns into prey because its energy gets consumed by the predator, that is the hawk. that is our energy flow, right? It's that movement of energy. Now, this cow represents something in regards to what happens to that energy. We eat 100% of the energy that we consume, but do we use it all? The cow shows that it eats 100% of the grass. It loses 33% of the energy as heat, so it sweats it off. 4% of it gets stored within our body, all right? And then a whopping 63% gets wasted through gas, urine, and feces. Remember, that's our energy flow. The food chain is pretty simple. And we know the ecosystems are a lot more complex than that. So what can we use to identify and diagrams that help us understand that? Well, that's a food web. A food web is several food chains into one. And they can quickly become large and complex. Right? You know, here we have seeds that get eaten by the mice and the bird, and you know, the hawk begins to eat the robins and the woodpeckers. You know, the rabbit eats the grass, so does the mouse, but then the snake eats the mouse, and the cougar eats the rabbit, and it just becomes a mumble jumble of arrows. That is what an ecosystem would look like in regards to the flow of energy. Right? Remember, it's not just who meets who, it's the flow of energy. Now, this is great. However, ecologists realize that, yeah, this tells us the flow of energy, but it doesn't tell us how many organisms are needed in each. Well, that's where something called the pyramid of numbers comes in. Right? The pyramid of numbers shows us how much of each organism is needed to sustain a healthy ecosystem. All right? For example, the numbers here and the image here shows that there's a lot of grass in our bottom, at the base of the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid. Then there's a little bit less grasshoppers, then there's a little bit less woodpeckers, and then there's a lot less hawks. In this case, only one. Right? We need to have these numbers to kind of give us an idea of what is needed as we move up the food chain, or as we move up in the food web. What would happen if we had more hawks and we had woodpeckers? Well, then all the woodpeckers would go, and then if all the woodpeckers are gone, the number of grasshopper increases. Well, if the number of grasshopper increases, the number of grass decreases. And then once that happens, grasshoppers starve. And then the hawks starve. And then it just becomes a vicious cycle. All right? That is a pyramid of numbers, where it's starting to give us numbers in regards to population of species. Now, those numbers also have a meaning, and it's biomass. Right? Biomass is the total mass of all organisms in an ecosystem. So the weight of everything that's going on. And just as the pyramid shows that each level it gets less and less in regards to our organisms, biomass will become less and less as we move up. All right. The last little part that I want to talk about is our cleanup squad, our cleanup crew. Right? These are your scavengers and decomposers. Now, a common misconception is that they're the same thing. However, the textbook says that scavengers are organisms that feed on dead or decaying plant or animal matter. Right? Those are your worms, your beetles, crows and vultures. Right? A vulture is one of the best known scavengers that's around. Right? Well, if that's a scavenger, what's a decomposer? They're different. They grow on or in the dead or waste material, absorbing some of the nutrients into their own cells. So that becomes our bacteria, our fungi. Think of mushrooms. Right? That is a quick recap of topic 4. If you want good practice, I believe page 48 has several good questions that you could answer. Number 5 is great, where you could look out into your own community, look into certain ecosystems, and try to start pinpointing things. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please stay safe, stay out of trouble, and happy learning.